Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Saturday everybody. I hope you're all enjoying your weekend. Shanghai is testing most of the city today, and Beijing has introduced more restrictions as cases jump, unless there is a very serious development in the next 24 hours, in which case there will be a special video tomorrow, Sunday. We will unpack the outbreak and the lockdown situation on Monday. But first up for today, the economy. This week at a seminar organized by Peking University's National School of Development, academics warned that under the current zero-COVID measures, the national unemployment situation could get as bad as 2020, when up to 12% of the working population did not have work. Two economic issues that Beijing fears the most are unemployment and food inflation. This warning coming too as the capital reintroduces restrictions and closes down businesses in Chaoyang and Dongcheng this week, and Shanghai re-enters lockdowns in several areas only 10 days after lifting a citywide 2-month lockdown. According to a study conducted by Peking University, although the official unemployment rate, which only counts registered urban residents, peaked out at 6.2% in February 2020, the study estimated that the number of unemployed, the real number of unemployed in the country, could have been as many as 92.6 million, or 12% of the nation's working population. Zhang Dandan, an assistant professor at Peking University's National School of Development, warned at the above-mentioned seminar, quote, "Today we need to learn from what happened in 2020. It could mean that the jobless situation could reach a similar size." End quote. Next up, growth in debt in May. Yesterday, Friday, the People's Bank of China, China's central bank, published data on new bank lending in the month of May. Growth in debt surged far more than expected in May, even though analysts had already anticipated credit growth from policymakers attempting to arrest the sharp economic slowdown that we have seen in recent months. Chinese banks extended an incredible 1.89 trillion RMB, 282 billion US dollars in new yuan loans in May, nearly tripling what we saw in April. While household loans, including mortgages, rose after contracting in April, it was corporate loans, loans to corporations, both private and state-owned, which soared to 1.53 trillion yuan in May from about 570 billion yuan in April, which drove the large jump in credit growth that we saw for the month of May. Peking University China finance expert Michael Pettis observed on the data today, quote, "Total debt in China rose more than expected in May by 2.8 trillion RMB, a 0.9% month-on-month increase, or 10.7% annualized. If month-on-month GDP growth is flat in May, the country's annual debt-to-GDP ratio will have risen by 2.3 percentage points. Year-to-date, total debt is up 15.7 trillion RMB, for a 5% increase over the outstanding amount at the end of last year, 12.4% annualized. Few analysts look at the amount of additional debt needed to fund each unit of GDP growth, but it's worth noting that each RMB of additional nominal GDP growth is associated with roughly 5 RMB of additional debt." End quote. Now, one more thing while we're on the economy. A topic of continued interest on China Update is the cost of mass testing across the country and how it will be paid for. Sixth Tone has produced an excellent infographic this week calculating the costs to local governments of regular testing. They compared the estimated annual testing expenditure of each city with the year's medical budget and found that many second and third tier cities are facing significant financial pressure. They point out that, for example, the testing budget in the northern city of Hohhot in Inner Mongolia exceeds its medical budget, concluding, quote, "Without help, testing could be a heavy burden on these cities." End quote. Health regulators are deeply aware of this, though. For example, the National Health Commission said on Thursday, quote, "Local governments should avoid unnecessary mass COVID-19 nucleic acid testing," end quote, and that, quote, "authorities should devise the frequency and scope of testing campaigns based on local epidemic situations," end quote. While in isolation, this is very sensible advice. However, local authorities have marching orders from the Politburo Standing Committee to implement zero COVID policy, and so a middle way approach comes with risks, especially political risks, that many cadres simply will be unwilling to take. Next up, Chinese geopolitical moves. If you guys are enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button. And for anyone who wants to go the extra mile, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and crypto links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. People's Republic of China Foreign Minister Wang Yi is on tour in Central Asia this week. Some commentators are speculating that he may be laying the foundation or laying the groundwork for Xi's first overseas visit since early 2020. Wang began a 4-day tour to Kazakhstan on Monday. He attended a group meeting with the foreign ministers of the 5 Central Asian nations of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. As former Soviet states, the People's Republic of China visit will likely be raising more eyebrows in Moscow than in Washington. While the region is important geopolitically for China, relevant to the Belt and Road Initiative and to achieving strategic depth for the nation, also the Global Security Initiative and Global Development Initiative were both discussed. However, an immediate concern for Beijing is energy security, and we have been following this theme now for well over half a year. On the first day in Kazakhstan, for example, China pledged to boost energy and security ties. There are more policy concerns too. At the foreign ministers' meeting, a joint statement expressed that the nations would, quote, cooperate to fight the 3 forces of terrorism, separatism, and extremism, and ensure food security, coordinate positions on the situation in Afghanistan in a timely manner, end quote. Now, jumping from China's shared backyard with Russia to the much more dynamic and geopolitically flashpoint-ridden region to its south, this week we learned that the People's Republic of China will be upgrading the main naval base. According to the Director General of the Cambodian Defense Ministry's Material and Technical Services Department, over the next 2 years, Chinese firms and technical experts from China's military will build and renovate a number of structures, including a maintenance workshop, slipway and dry dock for repairing vessels, warehouse, 2 piers, and sewerage infrastructure. The upgrades will be funded by a Chinese loan. The Cambodian defense minister expressed that the upgrades are to modernize the nation's military and that the port would not be used by China's People's Liberation Army as a naval base. Beijing also expressed that the port would not be used to host Chinese military forces. Several regional neighbors, as well as the United States, Japan, Australia, and others, will unlikely be taking their word for it. Now, while we're in Southeast Asia, let's briefly step over to Singapore, which is hosting this year's Shangri-La dialogue. And there have been fireworks already. Yesterday, Friday, China's defense minister Wei Fenghe warned that China will, quote, not hesitate to start a war, end quote, if Taiwan declares independence. Wei reportedly made the comments to U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in a sidelines meeting. China's defense ministry says that Wei expressed, quote, if anyone dares to split Taiwan from China, the Chinese army will definitely not hesitate to start a war, no matter the cost, end quote. However, despite the bellicosity of these words, Beijing did describe the meeting as constructive. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, Mr. Austin, in response, quote, reaffirmed the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, opposition to unilateral changes to the status quo, and called on China to refrain from further destabilizing actions towards Taiwan, end quote. The 2 military leaders, in their first face-to-face meeting, also discussed Ukraine and other regional concerns. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida, delivering a keynote address to open the Shangri-La Dialogue Security Summit yesterday, pledged to, quote, fundamentally reinforce Japan's defense capabilities within the next 5 years, end quote. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, in 2021, despite being the 3rd largest economy in the world, Japan's military spending was estimated at $54.1 billion, 9th globally. In his speech yesterday, Kishida also promised to provide at least $2 billion of maritime aid 2 Indo-Pacific countries over the next 3 years for maritime security equipment, including patrol vessels, and to support maritime transportation infrastructure. Using language very uncharacteristic of past Japanese leaders, Kishida expressed that Japan has adopted a new type of, quote, realism diplomacy for a new era, end quote, and, quote, I myself have a strong sense that Ukraine today may be the East Asia of tomorrow, end quote. And with that, we'll end today's episode. Have a good weekend, everyone. I'll see you on Monday.